Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University, and welcome to Outrider 43. Why do I need a coach? Now, this is part of this weird series that we're exploring, the answers to questions that none of us are really asking. And those weird answers involve mentoring and coaching and networking. Now, I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid involving these words and phrases and practices and methodologies. So in this series, we're going to explore these words, how they operate, why they operate, their strengths, but also their challenges and their weaknesses. So yes, this week we are in coaching. And there is no doubt we need to contextualise what is going on at the moment. We need to think about what happened in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And we need to recognise that very different contexts and problems and challenges emerged in each of those years in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Whether we're talking about housing insecurity, food insecurity, energy insecurity, the precariat workforce, the shambles that is the contemporary workplace. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? But these problems since the pandemic have intensified and presented themselves in very, very different ways. And I think now, in 2024, we all have a very deep consciousness about how public education and public health, our public institutions, have failed us and why that failure has occurred. And I think the reason why we're living through this systematic failure is because we've got a failure of leadership. This is Baudrillard's double refusal. Those of you that don't know about Baudrillard or Baudrillard's double refusal, this is the refusal to lead and then the refusal to be led. So the failure of our leaders to actually lead in any form, and then because of that experience of incompetence, people stop following leaders. That's Baudrillard, and he was correct. So what's the point? What can drive us to get up in the morning? What can drive us to just do more than survive? Really important questions. And this reality explains why groups in power, call them leaders if you like, start to rely on all these cliches and shorthands about mentoring and coaching and networking. They're pretending that there's a proper process in place, that if you just work hard, there's a merit-based system. Whereas actually, as we all know, we live in a system of patronage, of dilemate, of making sure that the people that we know and we like, who are just like us, continue to occupy positions of power. Therefore, I'm going to talk about coaching in the Outrider this week, why it exists, its strengths in difficult times like this, but also its profound challenges, okay? And I also want to, particularly now, this year, draw a distinction between the noun of the coach, to coaching, and I want to look at coaching as a methodology and show therefore how that methodology can and should move between different functions and socializations in our life. Okay, so before I define coaching and look at strengths and weaknesses, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got involved in this. So my positionality is sort of important here. So through a lot of the last 16 years of my life, I have been in leadership positions, and a lot of those leadership positions have involved me having the great privilege of working with professional staff as we describe them in North America. And this is an absolute privilege because professional staff are the flesh and the blood and the bone, the very backbone of higher education. They are the first person a student sees when a student phones the university. The person who picks up that phone is a professional staff member. Okay. So the professional development programs for professional staff in our universities are absolutely rubbish, right? All the focus is on academics and, performance management and professional development plans and so forth. And these are not appropriate to understand the very distinctive career trajectory and pathway of professional staff. So noting from 2016, almost all of my direct reports, I'll use the dreadful phrase, almost all of my direct reports were professional staff. And so that was a moment for me to activate a learning protocol to be of support and assistance to those staff. So I enrolled in the University of California Davis Certificate, Coaching Skills for Managers. And there were 5 subjects in it. It was really, really strong stuff like coaching conversations, how to use the methodology as a manager, how to create strategies and plans for development for this remarkable group of staff. It was great. And I enjoyed that course immensely and I learnt a lot. And I realised that coaching is a learning methodology that can enable and support all of us, and that the best of managers, let alone leaders, but the best of managers must have the methodology of coaching available to them to deploy at specific times. Now, can I say the best mentors also know when the mentoring thing isn't working, like let's just talk, let's just overshare experience, when the mentoring thing isn't working and actually the person, the mentee, requires coaching and that methodology is then deployed. So after the pandemic and between my 2 dean appointments, I then continued to do this professional development work in coaching. And I moved to further education and I went to the IAP College in the United States, and I did 4 coaching certificates. Really, really interesting, weird stuff, life coaching, executive coaching, wellness coaching, and I think the best course was actually time management coaching. But you're getting a sense of the methodology as I use these phrases. Now, yes, I do coach people, not at the moment, but I am very, very selective in who I coach. But when I'm in a professional job like the dean at the moment, I certainly don't have any conflict of interest and coach anybody. So I understand coaching and its benefits, but I also understand the profound weakness of this paradigm as well. And that's why these days I tend to talk about coaching methodologies a lot rather than the coach, the self-standing noun. So this Outrider is going to now walk you through the benefits of coaching, perhaps for you at a particular point of your life. And we're going to finish off by exploring really when you have to be careful and you're thinking of getting a coach and to be aware what you're doing and the risks. Coaching has specific goals and has specific imperatives. A coach enables another person to achieve their goals, to persevere, to move beyond their comfort, to move beyond mediocrity and take a risk, but take a risk in a structured, careful, reflexive and responsive way. A person hires a coach at a particular moment of their life. It's often a moment of crisis, a moment of pivot. Something has to change. Mentoring that we talked about last week is activated within an organisation, within an institution. So it's a mode of socialisation to ensure that the power structures that currently exist continue to exist. So it's a socialisation mode. Coaching is, unless it's not, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Coaching is not about an organisation. It's not about an institution. It's not about KPIs and stuff. It's about an individual and an individual's goals. And of course, those individual goals may be, and I would argue probably these days should be, very different from the organisational or institutional goals. So coaching is quite delicate and responsive in its approach. So a coach lives in the present of their client. That's quite important. So there's no judgment. The coach takes a step back from the situation, offers, and you've heard me use this phrase a lot, offers an accurate mirror to the situation and then provides alternative strategies that are, if you will, helping the person understand what they're saying and what they're doing are actually disparate. At its most basic, that's what a coach does. So coaches park expectations, and coaching works at its best, I think, when it helps people who are way overscheduled, who are way too busy, have lost their way, can't work out their priorities, are just lost in their own lives. Works very well that way. Coaches calmly re-establish priorities and processes, and also create accountability processes for those goals. Yep. Now, it is important to recognise what coaching is not. Coaching is not therapy of any kind. Almost all coaches are not psychologists or social workers. Big hi to Megan, who is a coach and a social worker. That's tremendous, but it's rare. Coaching focuses on and in the present, not the past. It is short term. It activates change. Coaching just doesn't exist for a chat. It exists to activate change. And there is an argument in the history of coaching that coaching worked with successful people to help them become more successful. And that's true, because coaching had its origins in financial planning. Oh my goodness me. But most coaching now has been democratized, and it starts with a human wherever they are. Not necessarily a leadership position or successful. It works out what success is in a bespoke and customised fashion. But coaching does not provide any mental health advice. And this is quite important. If mental health challenges present during the coaching, I as a coach stop. A lot of coaches have a parallel process where they allow mental health therapies to occur with coaching. I tend to stop and get the mental health matters sorted out with a professional, and then return to coaching when those matters are resolved. Also remember that coaches are not consultants. Now, I do both, and they're very, very different formations. So people who hire consultants want people to do the research on the organisation or the problem, do it, and then come to the company and present recommendations and strategies going forward. So there's no chat or conversation about, what's the best approach. Consultants are hired to provide solutions. Coaches instead work with individuals, sometimes groups, on a short-term project, situation, problem, or issue. And that means we walk alongside a human being. We respect their views, we respect who they are, but we also offer reflexive commentary to enable movement. Now, there are lots of reasons why coaching is currently going through a boom, an explosion at the moment in numbers, in profile, in publishing, and all of these reasons have intensified after the pandemic. A series of longitudinal studies have shown the scope and scale of dissatisfaction and despair that human beings are carrying in their daily lives at the moment. And the problem is, people are living in despair, and rightly so. That's accurate. It's a terrible environment. People are behaving disgracefully, and people are in despair. And the problem is, if you talk with your mates, if you talk with your family and your friends about this, they're also struggling. So everybody gets together and go, yeah, it's a shambles, isn't it? It's disgraceful. And of course, you're not getting out of the problem. You're not finding any solutions or pathways out, because you all agree, diagnostically, the current environment is a mess. And you're right. Okay, so what happens with a coach is someone comes into this situation for a finite period and walks with you to create a pathway out of the mess. Okay, now personal coaching is expanding beyond belief. In the United States in 2022, the coaching industry was worth $2 billion, with a B, $2 billion. The growth arc is unbelievable. So public and private corporations are also using life coaching. So most of it is with individuals, but needless to say, businesses are now hiring coaches because mentoring hasn't worked too well. And so then they're now moving into coaching to try and resolve some situations. And we need to always remember, unlike mentoring, coaching is not about the coach. Nothing to do with the coach. coaching is about the client. Whereas in mentoring, remember, there's the mentor gains from mentoring and the mentee gains from mentoring. No, coaching, it's a service, they're paid, but it's not about them gaining personal growth. It's not about the coach. Coaching is a safe space to test ideas. It's a confidential space. All sorts of agreements are signed so that confidentiality is in place here. But coaching services are increasingly being used by universities during and after a restructure. Coaches are brought in for what's called, and I'm going to use the dreadful word, offboarding services. Offboarding services, who knew we'd be here? That is basically, what's offboarding? Somebody's been sacked, and so a series of things are brought in to help them with the post-sacked environment. So offboarding processes are a redundancy package of which coaching is part of that. So how to write a CV, how to write cover letters, can you imagine? Terrible. Trying to assist the person to rebuild their lives after they've been restructured out of the organisation. So when a company does something pretty dreadful to staff now, mentoring isn't going to work. So they need to bring in a coach to do the temporary solution. And of course they come in, do the triage and then leave. You can see the use of coaching here. And it's being used so that the poor coach has to care for this human that's been discarded by the organisation or the university, listen to the rage and the anger and the fear, and the coach has to absorb that and find strategies out of it. But of course the institution that's done the damage has paid somebody to listen to their former workers' pain. So we need to acknowledge that. Coaching, therefore, is increasingly becoming an important part of the contemporary workplace as the structures of the contemporary workplace fail. Now, Thomas Leonard is often described as the father of coaching, and his origin story is pretty significant, I think. In the 1980s, he was a financial planner, and so the coaching came from financial planning, and then he realised, well, we can help people plan their money, we should also help them plan their life around the money, and so he created Coach U in 1992, Coach Phil and so forth, and he died in February 2003 of a heart attack at the age of 47. The coaching went well. So there are lots of different types of coaching now. It has diversified, and I'll just list a few of them. Career coaching, executive coaching, relationship coaching, PhD coaching, carer coaching, grief coaching, carbon coaching, wellness coaching, work and life balance coaching, my goodness me. Now, a lot of these phrases are absolute rubbish. I think a lot of these phrases are really disturbing, but that's the diversification of the field now. If coaching has a single trope, it is that the coach comes to a client with respect of their views and their life, and through that respect asks that they reflect on the decisions that they've made and the decisions going forward. I think that's a pretty useful thing to do. It assembles clear goals, it excavates the limitations in thinking. It also talks overtly about the contextual barriers to change and asks key questions and creates new space for goals, development and learning. So besides individual coaching, of course, these small, medium-sized enterprises are now using coaching extensively, and besides being used as offboarding services, it's being used for employee retention. So, of course, in a dreadful environment, the great people go, this is a terrible environment, and they leave. So coaching is being used to keep the good people in the organisation. It's also being used to manage the dreadful word that's being called burnout. So coaches come in to manage burnout, can you imagine? Greater productivity, increasing sales, and also, of course, leadership development. So the scope and scale of the shambles that exists in the contemporary workplace can't be solved internally by mentoring. Mentoring has failed because it's a socialisation to repeat patterns, and so now coaches are being brought in for finite periods to be frank, to triage the mess. Okay. So they're brought in for an hour, they're brought in a week, some may be on a retainer to keep workers working in the organisation. So coaching is a band-aid for a sick and a toxic workplace, a sick and a toxic university system, a sick and a toxic higher degree program. Can I say the number one reason, though, that coaches are hired in organisations is, of course, the dreaded leadership development. If we can just get enough good leaders, then all the structural problems in our lives will disappear. You notice there's no attention to followership, that's the rest of us, no attention to followership or how strong teams are sustained. Leadership, very easy to teach. Lots of degrees, very easy to teach. The complexity of keeping a team together and working through followership, very hard to do, and that's not being addressed at all. Many of you may have never heard of the word followership. Very interesting literature, but very undercooked. Okay, so executive coaching is the top end of town. This is the C level, so Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, so the C level bits of the organisation. Love a bit of coaching, that's great. And this is the oldest model of coaching. So making sure that successful people continue to be successful. Great. Now, I believe in the diversity of coaching, actually. I believe in the democratisation of coaching. I think it is a good thing. We need to recognise, though, that all of this started with executive and leadership coaching, and that's left its fingerprints on a lot of the methodologies. Coaching can and should be a guide on the side, listening and encouraging, but also ensuring a more active accountability protocol. Coaching can be in person, it can be via Teams, via Zoom. In the old days it used to be done by phone, can you imagine? So coaching goes through a series of stages. There's often a preliminary session that can be called an induction or orientation session. That first session is often free, can I say, where there's an intake or a preparation for the coaching. What's the issue? How would the coach and the client like to proceed from there? See if they get on, see if the goal can be agreed and the protocols can be agreed. So that's great. And there are lots of coaching techniques and practices. So in that intake session, that is a discussion, does the person, for example, want to do homework between the sessions? How do they want the accountability measures to be in operation? The methodology of coaching is really about the 3 Ps. It's prioritising, planning and performing. Prioritising, planning and performing. That's it. That's it. And the key is to not only talk about change, too much of this in the culture, not just talk about change, but actually implement it and be accountable for that implementation. The point about coaching is that the sessions are finite. This is crucial. They're not ongoing, they're not never-ending. There is a goal that is configured in the intake session, and often 2, 3, 4 sessions are in place to enable that goal. When I do it around one goal, very, very short term. And then if someone wants another goal, we do another gig and we go for that goal as well. We don't confuse things. We do one at a time, very short, very finite, very accountable. And coaching sessions vary in length. They can be 30 minutes, they can be 60 minutes, they can be 90 minutes. But coaching is a strong place, I think, to enable and support people in very difficult and isolating times. But there are challenges, there are deep problems in coaching. I have not drunk the Kool-Aid. And I'll list the big 4. And these are enormous problems that I'm not sure how they can be reconciled. So if you're thinking about getting a coach or coaching, remember these 4 problems. 1, coaching is a highly under-regulated industry. So social work, teaching, nursing, midwifery, these are profoundly important professions and they are highly regulated. There are degrees, credentialing, professional development. Thanks for playing. Excellent. But coaching is highly under-regulated. Anybody can call themselves a coach. And there is, of course, gold in them there hills. So people are encouraged to call themselves a coach randomly. So there are coaching qualifications. I've done a few. I think they're pretty good. at university level, at FE level, vet level, I think they're great. I think they're useful and they should be checked and verified. But I think it needs to be more than that. I think there needs to be regulation of this industry. So we need to recognise that coaching can do great damage. It can come into somebody's life and slice it up like a watermelon, right? This is a dangerous profession as well. So regulation will enable those sort of challenges to be managed. Second problem, coaching can be absolutely pointless unless both parties commit to do the work and to change. Now, talking is important. Communication is incredibly important. But if either the coach or the client are not all in, are not committed to the process, then the communication, the chat, ain't going to go anywhere. So the client must be prepared, must come to the coaching prepared to do the work to make the change. And the coach must be completely the guide on the side and have done their homework in between the sessions and enabling those changes, right? Talking and regular meetings may be pleasant, that's great, but it doesn't create change. Therefore, in that induction session, discuss the reflection, discuss the accountability, discuss the homework. What is happening in the meetings? What is happening between the meetings? What does success look like? Okay, 3. Ooh, yeah. Remember that coaching is a service business. Ensure that you understand as the client what the beginning, the middle, and the end of that business looks like. Coaches are paid to coach, and they're paid by increments of an hour. Therefore, because it is an unregulated space, it is in the coach's interest to keep the sessions going on indefinitely. So remember, why I'm so staunch about this is we're often dealing with people going through enormous life changes. They are vulnerable, okay? And so I get very concerned that coaches are preying on that vulnerability. So it is important for you as a client that you begin with the end in mind. There must be a contract at the start of the process, a finite number of sessions, and what success looks like at the end. And then look, another contract can be configured, another goal can be configured, and we go again. Now, if your coach does not focus on, and again, I'll use the dreadful cliche, does not focus on deliverables during the session, so what are you doing, how can we improve it, then be very careful, be very aware that they're paid to keep this thing going, okay? 4, be aware of the limitations of a coach's role. Now, when I do PhD coaching, and I never do it when I'm dean, can I say, but when I do PhD coaching, I am very honest and robust with the student about the role. So PhD coaching is not consultancy. I am not your supervisor, right? This is a very different role. Now, I never do this work when I'm dean, conflict of interest, but also can I say the dean role is very different. The dean role is a very unusual role. It is a governance role. Our singular most important duty, and I use the word duty, is to ensure that the high standards of scholarship and that degree is maintained, and indeed it is internationally responsive and respectful. We've got to keep the standards of a PhD high internationally. That's our job. We care for our students, we care for our supervisors, but the number one priority is making sure that the degree means something. Now, that's very, very different from an individual PhD coach. So I'm very clear, it's not a supervisory role, it's not a consultant role. But it does mean there are all sorts of quirky, weird functions that PhD coaches can enact. And for example, a great one is running oral examinations. So endlessly giving the student the opportunity to, here's an oral examination, so you've read the thesis, here's the oral examination, and offering feedback on that oral examination and then going again, right? That's a good use of coaching that. So remember, if you ever decide to get yourself a PhD coach, a writing coach, a life coach, be really clear about the methodology that is possible in that relationship. Coaching can intervene in assumptions. It works, I would argue, at its best when it does. But coaching like mentoring, is about assisting with individual goals and priorities. Neither of them are addressing the structural injustices in our organisations. As an under-regulated space, the ethics and the standards in coaching, particularly as coaching numbers are expanding so exponentially, must be questioned. But the focus on an individual and an individual's goals and development, that is important in difficult times. I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.